All right, everybody, welcome back to Ask a Dev, where we have just the right amount of crazy to be doing live Unreal Engine tutorials. My name's Kevin. We try to do these once a week, every Wednesday, 11:30 right now, but always check the schedule. I currently work as a senior principal tech artist at Riot Games. I currently work in R&D, get to do a lot of really cool stuff, but I actually get to do a lot of really cool stuff as a result of community questions and all the things that everybody is throwing out in the chats and everything like that. Speaking of community, a big shout out to everybody who's chiming in, helping each other out, Patreon members, etc. It's super awesome to see everybody coming together and trying to learn all this crazy Unreal Engine, real-time dev type stuff. So today we are going to be kicking off a series about skeletons, but rather than just hopping straight into skeletons, I figured it might be fun to do something a little bit different. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to steal or snatch the Unreal Engine skeleton and see if we can use that for our own characters. So today is all about getting our own characters in Engine, and we're going to be doing this in a little bit of a hijack kind of way. So maybe you have your own character you just want to see in the game. Maybe you're just tired of looking at Manny or Quinn and you just want to see something different. So this is kind of a quick little fast non-pipeline way of hijacking a skeleton and getting into Engine. We're going to be working in Unreal Engine and some 3D software. So with that, let's get going. So to start off with, what we have is we have our usual, let me just double check our levels and everything like that. Looks good. We have our usual third-person project. Now, what we want to do, and I basically just created my tutorial folder and my mesh folder. We're going to be using this later. So what we're going to do is we are going to try to take the Unreal skeleton and we're going to put it inside our character. So to do that, we need an Unreal skeleton to work with. One way to get that is after we create our third-person shooter project, if we go ahead and go to meshes, what we can do is we can take this as skeletal mesh from Manny and we can right click on it and we can go to asset actions and choose export. Now when we do this, what this is going to do is this is going to create an FBX file for us. I'm just going to, let me throw this on, actually let's do the simple Manny because I don't want this to be too complicated. So let's just asset actions export. We'll put this on the desktop. Let's delete the one that was there just so we're creating it from scratch. We don't even need that one. Okay, cool. So we have a clean slate to work from. And go ahead and SKM civil Manny and save. Now what this is going to do is this is going to create an FBX file. FBX file is a file format that is used to exchange files back and forth between different 3D software packages. You're probably used to it, but we're going to open it up and take a look at it here in a second. So I've just exported that. Now I'm going to open Maya. Whether you use Maya, 3D Studio Max, or Blender, take your pick. The general idea of what we're doing is the same thing. So first, let's take a look at what we just exported. So if we go to our desktop and we import that SKM Manny simple, you'll notice right away that what we have is we have what looks like our Manny character, but it's inside Maya. This is exactly what we want, because what we want to do is we want to steal the skeleton. To do that, there's a couple rules as we work. So we have our Manny skeleton. Now we need the mesh that we're going to be working with. So I'm going to import that as well. And in this case, we're going to be working with a mesh called vkid, which is an old mesh that I happen to have lying around. And let me just make sure I find the right one. So we want the vkid default model. Okay, now this is where we start to get into some of the rules. So let's talk a little bit about skeletons. So your skeleton, it's made up of joints. generally speaking, your joints are driving a mesh, just like your skin, except we're driving digital skin. And it's done by each vertex on your mesh is weighted to the skeleton by a certain amount. So, for example, the elbow drives the point on your forearm a certain amount versus your upper arm, etc. Now, your joints have what is called an orientation. So if I go into here and let me just turn on X-ray joints, you'll notice that all my joints are showing through my skin. If I pick one of these joints and I switch my manipulator to the gizmo for move, you'll notice that X is pointing down the length of this joint. That is pretty typical, especially in Unreal. I don't know if it's still the case, but it used to be. In order for things like physics and ragdolls and stuff like that to be happy, it wanted to have X down the joint. So what is important to understand is your joint, it's a bone, your skin is weighted to this bone, and this bone has an orientation. In this particular case, X points down the axis of the bone. And you'll notice that is the same for the forearm. The X, I'm looking at this manipulator here, you have the Z points up, Y is towards the back, and X is down the bone. So why am I telling you this? Because in Unreal, the best case retargeting would be to have the exact same skeleton. Then there is no retargeting. So if our mesh lined up perfectly with the skeleton, we'd have no retargeting, and that would work really well. And a lot of times for tack shooters, things like that, where it's important that everybody has the same hitbox, so gameplay's fair, etc., they are using the exact same skeleton. Now, there are some variants or some variations that are available as well that you can do, where you can have slight variations in skeletons, and those are some of the things we're going to be talking about as part of the skeletal series. Overall point here, though, is understand that this joint has a orientation that is determined by which way the axis is facing. Now, the second part of why I'm telling you this is because there are some rules as we make our mesh fit inside Manny so we can steal it and hijack it. And the general rules that we're going to adhere to are we are only going to rotate the joints. And if we do translate them, we are only going to translate them on one axis, the axis that is pointing down the length. So for example, if we were going to translate this joint, we would only want to do it down the x-axis, because that gives us, our skeleton is not going to match perfectly. But if all the rotations are pretty much spot on or darn close, even if they're not close, it still does a pretty good job. But anyways, ideally they would be the exact same rotations. Then what will happen is when Unreal goes to retarget it, we're going to get our best case retargeting. So with those two rules in mind, hopefully you're thinking, okay, that means that we need to do some work to make our mesh line up. So let's go ahead and do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this geometry and I'm going to just combine it into a single mesh. And we'll delete the history on that. I'm going to delete the old one. Okay, and the first thing I want to do is I'm going to make the characters have almost the same height. So let's scale our VKit up, and I'm kind of looking especially at the shoulders area here. Let me just double check. Okay, yep. So I'm kind of looking at the shoulders area. I'd really like these to line up pretty well. The legs look pretty good. We're just going to need to move them over, and that's going to get us roughly the scale. Now we're also going to need to move this back, trying to get the center of mash. That's mesh and mass combined. But anyways, trying to get the center of mass pretty close. Okay, so I think that's a pretty good starting point. So for me, depending on your software, that's probably going to do this differently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze the transformations on this and basically zero this out. So this is now the default settings for this VKit mesh, the model. So this is going to be the VKit MD. All right, now in order to help us, what I want to do is I'm actually going to duplicate our skeleton, and I am going to call this one, this is going to be OG Manny. And the reason I want to keep this is because remember I told you that we're going to, we only want to rotate or translate on a single axis, because what we're going to do is we're going to use the copy to pose the character, and then when we're done we need to snap it back to where it originally came from. So I want to keep a copy around that I can use as reference. So that's what our OG Manny is going to be. And I'm also going to do a quick thing here where I'm going to select this hierarchy, and I'm going to rename, modify, prefix hierarchy names. I'm actually going to rename all these joints for later to OG underbar, whatever they are. So it's the exact same joints. This is our reference. This is our OG Manny. So now we have that as that we can use. And what we're going to do is we're going to take actual, and actually I'm just going to hide this for right now. I'm going to put this in a layer. We'll call this OG Manny. OG Manny. Oh, okay. This is going to be the OG Manny layer. And we'll just hide that. Okay. So now what we're left with is we're left with our mesh, the one that we want in Engine, and we're left with the mannequin that we're going to use to pose it. And all we need to do is we need to do the work here of making this as best we can line up with our character. So we're going to kind of be posing this as best we can. And actually, I think I want to move VKit forward a little bit. Just a little bit, okay? So back to posing. Now we are not going to be spot on. That is okay. We're just going to get it pretty darn well. And I'm trying to get the mannequin mesh to be roughly inside or wrap around my mesh, because what we're going to do is we're going to steal, we're going to hijack the weights onto our character. So remember what I said, if we wanted to, we could translate only in one axis. So I'm going to translate this wrist out, and then I'm going to do a little bit of work here in the digits. Same thing here. I'm okay with just translating in one axis. Rotate this into place so that it kind of lines up with our pinky. We're going to do the same thing for the index. And basically we're just going to be spending a bunch of time moving our characters our mannequin bones to kind of give us the best fit that we can for this. And this is just going to take us a little bit to get dialed in. Now, this is not going to be perfect. It is going to be good enough. And by good enough, what I mean is all I want is I would like to see our character running around in Engine instead of Manny. So that's what we're going to do. And that is what we're going to call good enough. All right, so already that thumb looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and do the index fingers. Rotate those over. I'm not going to be able to get the metacarpals because I would have to translate those off of more than one axis. So, but that's okay, because at this point, you know, even if we get just these fingers lined up and working, that's going to be fine. All right, so we'll rotate these up into place. And then again, only translating on one axis, get the knuckles to line up a little bit better. And we got our index finger. So we're going to do the same thing for the middle. And I am going to skip ahead here in a minute, rather than torturing you all with watching me place all of these painstakingly. But I think it's good to understand what goes into this. Now, I'm going to use a couple of scripts that I have to help me with this. If you do not have scripts, that's okay. You're probably going to do this one time, and then after that, you'll have your skeleton already lined up, and you'll be able to reuse it to do other characters. Hopefully, you've been consistent about the way you've created your characters. And this is why your skeleton or your model posing, when you create your model posing, is important because you want characters to have the same default pose, one, for in-engine so that they get the best retargeting possible, and two, for situations like this where we are trying to do things that are a little bit outside the box, so that we can accommodate stuff like this in a fun way. So let's just move this down. There we go. All right, so you get the idea there. Now let's go ahead and knock out some legs. All right, so legs should be relatively easy. You can see if I go to wireframe, you can see we have the very dense Manny character underneath. That's going to be fine. And I'm just going to do my best to get that to line up. Once again, we are only rotating. And same thing for the foot. Let's see if we can't get that into place. And rotate up a little. And then maybe this one's a little weird because it has multiple translations on multiple axes. I'm not gonna mess with that one. Okay, so that leg is lined up. Now, once you get to a point where all that's good to go, we do need to do the head. Let's go ahead and do the head. I'm gonna show you a couple things about the head. So this is our neck. This is our head. We're only translating in X. I'm just going to move this so that the head joint is roughly where I would want it to be for this character's body. Okay, now I'm actually going to scale this head. And I'm going to scale this head a little bit because I would like to use this as a reference point, because what's going to happen is when we copy our skin weights, what it's going to do is it's going to look at Manny and it's going to look at our character and it's going to try to find the closest point between the two meshes, and it's going to go for each point and it's going to say which one's closer. And so the bigger the head is, or the more closely the head matches what's underneath it, the better chance I have at my skin copy. So we have our head, we have our neck, we have all this stuff done. Now we need to do the right side, and this is where whether you do it by hand or you do it with tools, it's up to you. Like I said, even if you have to do it by hand, it's not too bad because fortunately this is there's not that many joints. So in this case, I'm going to try to do this with a tool, and we'll flip this. Nope. Oh wait. And we may be doing this by hand. Interesting. There we go. Okay, pretty close. One of these should not be flipped. There we go. Okay. Let's undo all of that. We're just gonna type it in. The legs are a little bit different, I guess. So we have 8.48. Yeah, we'll just move it over by hand. That's fine. It's not going to take that long. Fortunately, the arms and the fingers are mirrored, so I can just do those pretty easily. So we'll get these kind of lined up. And as I said, I'm going to cheat a little bit and skip ahead to an already placed one. But let's just try this arm real quick. Wait, did I get the right joint? So we'll copy the arm and we will go to object space, paste it. Very cool. Okay, so that one worked. Great. And it just depends on how these joints are oriented. So let's get the lower arm and we will paste that in. It did not like that. There we go. Okay, so you get the idea. The goal of this step is to align the mannequin this is our posing mannequin as best as we can to our character's model so that it fits inside. Once we have that, let's go ahead and open that file. I'll show you the nice version of it. we are going to get, we want the model scales steel skin. Which one do we want? Rotation match. Let's open that and see if that's the right file. Nope, it's not the right file. Okay, hopefully this is the right file. Okay, great. So we have our character lined up both sides. It looks pretty solid. Now what we need to do is we need to do the actual skin stealing. So what do I mean by that? So first things first, what we want to do is we have a skeleton, and this skeleton is the root skeleton. And when we rotate it, what we want to do is, actually, let me just, history, okay, cool. So when we rotate our upper arms, for example, Manny is still rotating, but our V kid is not. So what we need to do is we need to, first, we want to skin V kid to the same joints that Manny's using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick all of those joints, and depending again, once again, on your software, you can figure out the best way to do this. In this particular case, I'm going to use a little bit of Mel in this case, and I'm going to get skinCluster -query-inf. Interesting. I wonder what string influences. It does not like that. We're gonna have to put a Z on it. Okay, so let's select all of our influences with a Z. Okay, so now that we have all of our influences selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my VKid model, and I'm going to choose skin, bind skin. Now I'm just going to use the default bind, and what's going to happen is it's going to do the best it can with that. So now at least both meshes move, but you'll notice that the deformations aren't that great. That's why we're going to use Manny. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the Manny skin, which is this LOD 0, and our VKid skin, and I'm going to copy from one to the other. Now, in Maya, that is underneath the skin, copy skin weights. Where is it? Copy skin weights. The settings that I personally like to use is closest point on surface 1 to 1, so that it's not making stuff up. So let's go ahead and copy. And when we do that, if we pick our arm bone again, you can see we get a much better deformation. Right, which is great. Okay, if you're using Blender, there's a lot of tutorials out there. It's called transfer weights. You have to select them in a different order, but just as a heads up, goal here is to copy Manny's weights to your mesh. Once you have that, we're getting closer. We're getting there. So now our character can move, and actually it's kind of fun to play with. If we just, like, for example, if we open up our spines, if we just grab our spines, you can see our character's already starting to move. Okay, now one thing that is worth noting is you'll notice that I have a problem with this particular character. And the problem is this staff that is on his back is traveling with a bunch of different things. So this is a good moment maybe if you've never worked with skeletons and skinning, just to show you how all this stuff works. So let me go ahead and take our mannequin and put it on a display layer so I can get rid of it so you can see. And what we need to do is we need to edit these weights. So let me get out of X-ray, and in Maya, and here's the thing, the principles of this, they apply the same, whether it be Blender or 3D Studio Max or even Unreal. You can actually paint skin weights and create your character skinning inside Unreal now. It's in beta, but anyways, so the idea here is what we want to do is we want it so that when we pick, let's say spine 4, when we rotate spine 4, you see how the stick goes with it, but not the base of the stick. And when we pick spine 5, the top, but not the bottom. So we want this whole thing to travel only with spine 4. So let's go ahead and choose skin weights, and we are going to paint skin weights. Now this is actually a lot of fun. When we do this, if we switch this, I was going to show you, let's see if I can show this. Multicolor feedback. Okay, so this is kind of cool. This is kind of a weighted map where you can see all the different colors represent different joints. Now, it's kind of fun to look at just from a visual teaching standpoint. For me personally, I like to work one joint at a time. So in this particular case, I could show you up here if we pick, for example, if we pick our upper arm, you can kind of see the weighting that's happening here. White is 100% will follow the joint you have selected, and black means it doesn't follow at all. So in this particular case, if we look at, like, for example, our spine, here's our weighting of our spine. So you can see what is weighted to this spine 4 joint. Now, the one that I want to add here is I would like this stick to follow spine 4. So I'm picking spine 4, I'm switching to add, and then I'm changing my opacity and value to 1. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this stick, this staff. And actually I'm going to just do a quick zoom here. We don't need this tool anymore. I'm going to do a quick zoom here. There are a lot of cool tools for helping with skin weighting. If you're using Maya, I love NG skinning tools. That's a good one. I've written my own, and the default ones are getting better and better. All right, so the top of the stick is weighted. Now I'm going to go ahead and weight the bottom of the stick as well, the staff. So as I get this fully weighted to white, remember white means it's 100% follow. It's basically an alpha mask. So now when we pick spine 4 and we rotate, this whole staff goes with it. And we pick spine 5, the staff does not travel, which is good. Okay, so just a quick little weight editing demo. Same principles apply whether you're using pretty much in any tool you're using, and you might have to do something like that for your accessories depending on how well it does with copying the weights over. So at this point, we have the Manny skeleton inside of our mesh, but it's in the wrong default position. So this is where the original skeleton that we made a duplicate of comes into play, because we're going to use that as our reference. So let's see here. Here's our Manny OG. I can bring that back. What we want to do is we want to snap our characters or reorient all of our joints to go back to the same default pose as Manny. Now, yeah, it's probably best because that'll get us as close as possible to the default pose, so we will get better in-engine retargeting. Now, it is very difficult to actually, you could go through and you could go one joint at a time. You could use a tool, copy the rotations, paste them on. You could do them one at a time. For example, you can see here, this is negative 4.3, 46, and negative 4. If I type those in here, negative 4.3, 46, and negative 4, you can see that that's pretty close, right? I don't want to do that for every single joint because that would be a lot of work. So I am going to do a quick little script that is going to help us do that. So let's do this. It looks like this file did not have our prefixing. So let's just reapply that. So to do that, select the hierarchy again. I'm going to modify, prefix the hierarchy. I'm going to go with OG underbar, and that's going to prefix our reference skeleton. Okay, so let's see here. Where is my notes? Okay, so what we're going to do is a little bit of Python. And then once you write this once, you don't have to do it again. It's nice to have. And some little bit of scripting. All I'm doing in this case is I'm going to get the hierarchy. I'm going to select the whole hierarchy. I'm going to get the OG joints. I'm going to set that equal to SL equals true, the selected joints, if I could spell true. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the original rotations. I'm going to set that to an empty array. And keep in mind, you can do this by hand. Don't be scared off by a little bit of scripting. I'm just doing this to save time during the demo. You could go joint by joint. I just don't want to do that for joint in OG_joints. Well, I did not spell that right. I want this to be called joint. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to get a rotations of the joint. Okay, and in this case, that's going to be joint query equals true, rotation equals true, rotation equals true. I keep spelling true wrong, and object space equals true. So what is this doing? Actually, I'll talk through it here in a second. Let me just get this true here. Okay, and then we have our new joint is going to be equal to joint replace, and we're going to replace OG underbar with nothing. So that gets us the name of our new joint, and I can even print them out if we want to, just so I can see that it's doing them all. And then finally, we're going to reset our joint to be the original there we go. Row equals rots, and finally object space equals true, just so we know. Okay, so what does this do? All this does is it gets all of our joints, and then for every single joint, it's going to go through and get the rotation of the original joint, and then it's going to take the original joint and replace OG underscore with nothing so that it's the name of the new joint. Remember, that's why we did that. And then it's going to take those rotations and it's going to apply those. This needs to be commands. It's going to apply those to our skeleton. So when I run this, if I just pick the root, if I run this, theoretically, you'll see that our character snapped into place, right? Did you see that? All the joints all at once. Now, that is far faster than doing it by hand, which is why a little bit of scripting never hurts. And especially when you start getting into the fingers, that can get to be a whole lot of fun. So we're getting close, y'all. We're getting close. We have now successfully taken our character. We have used the Manny skeleton to pose our original character into the same default pose as Manny, using the same skeleton, which means we're going to be able to reuse all the animations that were already done inside Unreal for any project. So for example, all of the projects that use Manny, whether it be Lyra or the marketplace or whatever, I will be able to play on my character, and I'm going to show you how that works. So at this point, we have our character. I believe we are ready for our final step, but we've got one more thing I want to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my mesh. So this is where we get into another little piece. When you create the attachment of your skin to your joints, at that moment, usually most 3D software creates what's called a bind pose. That bind pose is a record of where the joints were when the mesh was bound, when that connection was made. So right now, our bind pose is where our model was done, with our arms out to the side a little bit. We need our bind pose to be, I would like our bind pose to be the same as Manny's. Now, there's ways around this. You can do some things on import to change these and use reference frames and stuff like that. But for simplicity, it would just be nice if it matched. So what I've done is I have duplicated my geometry. I'm actually going to rename this as our final. And all I'm going to do is pick our influences again. Oops, let's pick our influences. does not like that. Let's grab the influences from here and then select our influences. Nope. Okay, so now we have our influences. I'm going to pick our final mesh and I'm just going to reskin it again. I'm going to skin, bind skin, and then I'm going to take our pose mesh. If we rename this, that would be nice. Let's just rename this to be the pose mesh. I'm going to pick the pose mesh in this case and the final mesh, and I'm going to go ahead and once again, I'm going to copy the skin weights, copy skin weights. So now this final mesh, everything's the same, except now the bind pose for this mesh is the same as the first frame that we want for Manny. So as an example, if we took our original mesh and we right clicked, actually it's going to be difficult about this for me. All right, I was going to hopefully show you. All right, so if we take this and we right click, can we do, oh, I know where it is. Just to show you what I'm talking about, if we go to skin, go to bind pose, did you see how it snapped? That's not what we want. Okay. Oh, and then if I undo, oh, it's not happy. Not happy at all. So, but that's okay because we saved off our stuff, so we can hide this. Even our, even this has got messed up as a result of that. Okay, that's okay. I've got another copy of it, but you saw the bind pose, all right? So we want basically our final. I've got it here. Same thing. This is our final character where our bind pose is the same as Manny's original pose that we pulled in. But you saw, though, when I went to the bind pose, it changed, and I don't want that change. So here we go. Last step from our 3D software, whether you're in Blender or whatever you're doing, is we need to now export this so that we can use this as a new skeletal mesh. All right. Now, what you can do is usually the way this works is you pick your root joint and your mesh, and then you can go to File, Export. Depending on your program, you choose Export, Selection, make it sure it's etc. I'm not doing that. I have a tool for this. It's a lot faster, and we're doing a demo, so I want to make sure that we have this. Basically, the way this works is it's nice where I can just we're gonna call this live, vkid live. Okay, I can actually just set this, and then when I it'll automatically find the joints and everything for me. So let's just go ahead and click export. At this point, we are done with our 3D software, and we can go back to Unreal and see how we did. So in our tutorial folder, in our meshes folder, I'm going to right click, and what we want to do is we want to import our new mesh. And I need to go back and look at where that got saved real quick. That went to, oh, that went into a really funky place. It went to the wrong character because I forgot to set my project, but that's okay, we can find it. Okay, so let's get vkid live. So let's open this. Now, when we choose import, this is where, oh, actually, did we mess up? Hold on, we may have messed up. Oh no, we didn't mess up. We shouldn't have messed up. So there's two things on import. All right, actually, and there's one thing that's worth pointing out that's important. You'll notice here that my root joint is out. It's basically unparented from the hierarchy. Earlier on in the demo, when I grouped everything together and renamed it, you want to pull your root joint out, because if there's anything above it, depending on which software package you're using, when you export it, it'll change the hierarchy. We don't want to change the hierarchy. We want it to be the same. So in this particular case, when we go to import it, we have two options here. Now, kind of like the old way to do it was we would import this onto the same skeleton. We would just pick Manny's skeleton. And that'll work because we have the exact same number of bones in the same order, etc. But since Unreal 5, there's a new way to handle this. So during prototype, and especially when I'm doing things like this where I want to iterate fast and I don't want to mess, and we're going to talk a little bit when we get into skeletons about skeleton bloat and dealing with conflicts and all those kinds of things. Because I don't want to deal with that, I'm just going to clear this out and I'm just going to import it as a completely new skeleton, and I'll show you how to manage that in a second. So let's just import this. Okay, so now we have everything for our character in Engine. And if we double click on our character, let's just go ahead and dock this. You can see here's our VKid. It's in our mannequin pose. But if you try to play a Manny animation on this, it's not going to work. So if we change this, for example, in our preview settings, and we use specific animation, there's nothing available in the dropdown. That's because Unreal Engine does not know that this skeleton is compatible with mannequin. If you had imported directly onto the mannequin skeleton, these things would already be here. It would already work. So we need to tell Unreal that this skeleton is compatible. Now, to do that, if we go to the skeleton and we go to Window, this is kind of hidden. You have to go to Window, choose Asset Details. This pops up a dialog for us, and you can choose a compatible skeleton. In this particular case, I am going to choose the Manny, SK Mannequin. Okay, once we do this, if we save this, when we go back to our skeletal mesh, I can now pick everything that Manny can play, I can now try to play on VKid. So let's try run. Holy smokes, y'all. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so what we have is we have Manny animations playing on VKid. So if I want to see my characters in game, I can, it literally, what would it take us, an hour? An hour. You can spend a little bit of time, and then you will have your own unique meshes in game, but we're not quite done yet. We're getting close though. We're getting close, y'all. So I'm going to reset this back. That was just to show you that this actually works. I'm going to set this all to default. I'm going to go back here. Let's just go ahead and save this so that I can upload all these files for our Patreon crew. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to make it so that when we play, we are actually playing as VKid as well. And I'll show you a couple cool things. So to do that, because now everything's compatible, all we have to do is go to our third person blueprint. We'll double click on BP third person character, and over here in our meshes, I'm going to change a couple things. I'm going to go to the Manny blueprint, and I'm going to choose the VKid mesh. Okay, so let's compile that. If we go to our viewport, we should see our VKid. Notice VKid is breathing. So VKid's playing idle. And we can now play, and you'll notice that when we run around, we have our VKid in Engine. Now, proportions are a little bit different because they, he's kind of got a big head, but he can jump, he can run, he does everything that I could do with Manny, I can now do with VKid. And even to the point where, for example, there was the IK foot placement stuff. You can see how when he's resting on the edge, his IK feet, one is up, one is down. So all of this stuff still works. And that is all because we took the time to line the skeletons up as best as we could, so that at the very least we followed a couple rules with rotation and translation. So with that, we can go ahead and wrap it up. This was, let me go ahead and escape out of that. This was a quick intro to skeletons in Unreal Engine. A little bit of weight painting, a whole bunch of stuff, but the whole idea here was to go ahead and give you all the tools that you need to potentially start using your own characters in Engine with minimal amount of work. The cool thing about this is once you do it once, if all of your characters are modeled generally the same way, you'll be able to reuse this work. And this also means not only can you use Manny, but you can use anything from the marketplace that was done with Manny. And because all of these projects come with a retargeter between old Unreal Engine 4 Mannequin and Unreal Engine 5 Mannequin, as well as a control rig. That means that you can also animate your character using control rig now. You can use Unreal Engine 4 assets using the retargeter. It basically, with pretty minimal amount of work, you can update the visuals for the stuff that you're working on, the projects you're doing, and things like that. Ultimately, you know, we're going to be talking and learning a lot more about skeletons, some of the pitfalls and things like that, but a couple quick lessons: only rotations, only translate on a single axis so that we could get the best retargeting possible, keeping the same names, and a little trick that they added starting in Unreal Engine 5 for compatible skeletons, which makes iteration a whole lot faster, and we don't have to worry about corrupting our core skeleton at all. So, as always, thanks for checking out this video. Thanks for being part of this community. If you like what we're doing, help spread the word, let people know what we're about. Patreon's available. If you want to show your support through Patreon, that's great. And I hope to see you all in Discord or an upcoming live Unreal Engine tutorial. My name's Kevin. I'll see you all in the next one. Take it easy.